The restaurant was the kind of place you go to be seen, not to eat. The lights were so low you could barely read the menu, which was written in a calligraphy so ornate it looked like a wedding invitation. The clinking of silverware on porcelain was a soft, polite whisper. Everything was designed to be expensive and forgettable, and that suited me just fine. That my name is Arthur Vance, and on paper, my life is a wild success. CEO of a tech firm I built from the ground up. Penthouse apartment with a view that could make a god feel small. A car that costs more than the house I grew up in. I had everything, and I felt nothing. That night was like any other. I just closed a multi-million-dollar deal, a fact that should have filled me with a sense of victory. Instead, it just felt like I'd checked another box on a very long, very meaningless to-do list. So I went to my usual spot, a corner table at the Gilded Fork, to perform the ritual of a man who has no one to celebrate with, ordering the most expensive steak on the menu. The waitress who approached my table was a young black woman, probably in her early 20s. She had a quiet efficiency about her, her movements smooth and practiced. She didn't smile a big, fake restaurant smile. Hers was a small, genuine curve of the lips when she spoke. "Good evening, sir. Can I get you something to drink while you look over the menu?" "A bottle of the 98 Cheval Blanc," I said without looking up from my phone, where I was scrolling through market reports. It was a pointless, reflexive gesture. I didn't care about the numbers anymore. "An excellent choice, sir," she said, her voice soft but clear. She glided away, and I didn't give her a second thought. To me, in that moment, she was just a function, a pair of hands to bring me my wine and my food. In my world, people were often reduced to their function. It was simpler that way. She returned with the wine, performing the sommelier's dance with the corkscrew and the decanter. I gave a perfunctory nod of approval after tasting it. "And to eat, sir, the Wagyu tomahawk, medium rare." "Of course," she said, and jotted it down in her small notepad. But before she turned to leave, she paused. It was only for a second, but it was a break in the smooth rhythm of the restaurant service. I glanced up from my phone, slightly annoyed by the interruption. She was looking at me, really looking at me, with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't pity, not exactly. It was recognition, concern. I dismissed it. I was a well-known figure in the city. She'd probably just recognized me from a magazine. The meal proceeded as expected. The steak arrived, a monstrous cut of beef, perfectly seared, and it tasted like money. It was rich and decadent and utterly soulless. I ate half of it, my mind a million miles away, chewing and swallowing without any real pleasure. I was thinking about the board meeting tomorrow, about a hostile op-ed in a business journal, about the empty silence that would greet me when I got back to my penthouse, when I was done. The waitress reappeared to clear my plates. "Was everything to your satisfaction, sir?" "It was fine," I said, the standard response of a man who had forgotten how to feel satisfaction. She returned with the bill in a small leather folio. I placed my Black American Express card inside without even looking at the total. As she took it, her fingers brushed against mine for a fleeting moment. She was gone for a few minutes, and when she came back, she placed the folio and a pen on the table for me to sign. "Thank you for dining with us, Mr. Vance," she said. Again, that pause, that look, this time. I met her gaze. Her eyes were a deep, soulful brown, and for a split second, I felt an unfamiliar pang in my chest, a flicker of something human. Then she was gone, disappearing into the hushed bustle of the dining room. I opened the folio to sign the receipt. Tucked neatly beneath the slip of paper was a small, folded napkin. My first thought was that it was unprofessional. Was she slipping me her phone number? The thought was more irritating than flattering. I almost threw it away. But curiosity got the better of me. I unfolded the napkin. On it, written in neat, careful cursive, were a few simple words. "I don't know if you remember, but you used to be Artie. Eleanor's grandson taught me how to read with your old comic books. She always said you had the kindest heart she'd ever known. I hope you haven't lost it." The world stopped. The low hum of the restaurant faded into a deafening silence. The carefully constructed walls I had built around my heart for the last 20 years didn't just crack, they shattered into a million pieces. Artie. No one had called me Artie in a lifetime. Artie was a skinny kid with scuffed-up sneakers and a head full of dreams. Growing up in a cramped apartment in the part of town my GPS now marked in red, Artie was the boy who spent his Saturdays at the Northwood Community Center, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And Eleanor wasn't my grandmother. She was everyone's grandmother. She ran the community center's soup kitchen with an iron will and an endless supply of love. She was a formidable woman with a laugh that could fill a room, and hands that were always dusted with flour. While my own mother worked 2 jobs, Eleanor was the one who made sure I had a hot meal, who checked my homework, who taught me how to peel a potato without taking half of it with the skin. The memories came back not as a gentle stream, but as a tidal wave. I could smell the yeasty scent of her baking bread. I could feel the worn-out smoothness of the wooden spoons we used to stir giant vats of stew. I could hear her voice, a low, melodic hum, telling me, "Artie, son, it doesn't matter how much you have in your pockets, it's what you've got in here," she'd say, tapping her chest. "That makes you a rich man." I remembered the comic books, my one treasure. I'd saved up my allowance for months to buy them. When I found out Eleanor's own grandson, a sweet, quiet boy named David, was struggling with his reading, I gave them to him. All of them. I spent afternoons with him, sounding out the words in the colorful panels, watching his face light up as a world of heroes and villains opened up to him. I looked at the note again. "Eleanor's grandson taught me how to read with your old comic books. My God, this waitress, she must have been one of the neighborhood kids. One of the faces in the crowd of children Eleanor looked after. My hands were shaking. The $100 steak sat like a stone in my stomach. The expensive wine tasted like ash in my mouth. I looked around the restaurant, at the wealthy patrons, in their designer clothes, talking about their stocks and their vacations, and I had never felt so utterly alone, so profoundly lost. I had become a man Eleanor wouldn't even recognize. A man who measured his worth in stock prices and square footage. A man who had completely and deliberately forgotten the boy named Artie, who had a kind heart. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped loudly against the floor, drawing a few annoyed glances. I scanned the dining room, my heart pounding in my chest. I saw her near the service station, her back to me, polishing glasses. I walked over to her, the napkin clutched in my hand. "Excuse me," I said. My voice sounded strange, thick with an emotion I couldn't name. She turned around, and her professional mask faltered for a second. She looked nervous, as if she expected me to reprimand her, to get her fired. I got your note," I stammered, holding it out. She nodded slowly, her gaze steady. "I wasn't sure if I should," she said quietly. "I'm sorry if I overstepped. It's just, I saw you come in here a few times. You always look so distant, so sad. And I just remembered the boy my mom used to tell me about. The boy who gave up his comics for my Uncle David. Your Uncle David. He passed away a few years ago," she said, a flicker of pain in her eyes. "But he never forgot what you did. He kept those comics his whole life. When I was little, he used them to teach me. He'd always say, 'This is from Artie.' He was a real-life superhero. A real-life superhero. Me. The man who had just spent an hour annoyed at market fluctuations. The words were a punch to the gut. "What's your name?" I asked, my voice barely. A whisper, "Sarah." "Sarah," I repeated. "And Eleanor, she passed on about 5 years after you. After you left the neighborhood," Sarah said gently. "She always asked about you, always hoped you were doing well. She was so proud when she saw your picture in the paper for the first time. She cut it out and put it on her fridge." I had to lean against the wall, the thought of that newspaper, clipping my cold, corporate headshot on Eleanor's warm, cluttered refrigerator, next to drawings from neighborhood kids and reminders for church potlucks, was too much to bear. I had built an empire, and all she had been proud of was the boy she once knew. A boy I had killed and buried under a mountain of money. Tears welled in my eyes. Here, in the middle of this temple of empty luxury, I began to cry, not loud, heaving, sobs, but silent, hot tears that tracked down my cheeks, washing away years of cynical dust. I didn't care who saw. For the first time in forever, I wasn't performing. I was just feeling. Sarah didn't say anything. She just stood there, her presence a quiet anchor in my storm. She reached into her apron and pulled out a clean napkin, handing it to me. It was a simple, kind gesture, an Eleanor gesture. The community center, I finally managed to say, wiping my eyes. Is it still there? Sarah's face fell a little. It's there, but it's struggling. After Grandma Eleanor passed, it was never the same. Funding got cut, the building's falling apart. They can barely keep the soup kitchen open 3 days a week. Of course it was. While I was building server farms and acquiring startups, the very place that had built me was crumbling. The place that had fed me, nurtured me, and taught me the meaning of wealth was starving. In that moment, a switch flipped inside me. The fog of ambition and loneliness that had clouded my life for 2 decades lifted. I knew what I had to do. It was so clear, so simple. I looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw the legacy of the woman who had saved me. Can you sit with me for a minute? I asked, when you're done with your shift. She hesitated, looking towards her manager. Don't worry about him, I said. A new kind of authority in my voice, not the authority of a CEO, but of a man with a purpose. I'll take care of it. An hour later, the restaurant was nearly empty. Sarah sat across from me in the plush booth, a cup of tea in her hands. I had explained everything to the manager, who was more than happy to accommodate the eccentric millionaire. We talked for hours. She told me about the neighborhood, about the kids who relied on the center, about the struggles and the small joys. I told her about my life, the real story, not the one from the magazines. I told her about the crushing loneliness, the feeling of being a ghost in my own life. I told her about Artie. By the time we left, the sun was threatening to rise. I didn't go back to my penthouse. I had Sarah give me directions, and I drove my ridiculously expensive car back to the old neighborhood. It had changed, but it was also the same cracked sidewalks, the same tired-looking brick buildings, and there it was, the Northwood Community Center. It looked smaller than I remembered, sadder. The paint was peeling, and one of the windows was boarded up, but the front door was painted a familiar, cheerful yellow, Eleanor's favorite color. I parked the car and just sat there, watching the neighborhood wake up. This was real. The smell of diesel from a passing bus, the sound of a mother calling her child's name, the sight of a stray cat slinking across the street. It was all more real than anything I had experienced in years. The next day, I didn't go to my board meeting. I went to my lawyer's office. I started a foundation. I named it the Eleanor Project. Its first and only mission was the complete restoration and perpetual funding of the Northwood Community Center. But I knew money wasn't enough. The old Arthur Vance would have just written a check and walked away, feeling falsely virtuous. Artie knew better. The following Saturday, I showed up at the center. I wasn't wearing a suit. I was wearing old jeans and a t-shirt. Sarah was there, a surprised, brilliant smile on her face when she saw me. The place was bustling with a few dedicated volunteers and a handful of kids. The man in charge, a tired-looking but kind-eyed man named George, looked at me skeptically. Can I help you? He asked. I'd like to volunteer, I said. I hear you need some help in the kitchen. He looked me up and down. You know how to handle a 50-pound bag of potatoes? A genuine smile spread across my face for the first time in what felt like a century. As a matter of fact, I said, I do. I spent that whole day in the kitchen. My hands, usually accustomed to a keyboard or a fountain pen, grew sore and blistered from the potato peeler. The steam from the giant pots made me sweat through my shirt. But I wasn't tired. I was alive. The sound of children's laughter from the other room was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. At the end of the day, Sarah, George, and I sat at one of the folding tables and ate bowls of the same stew I had helped make. It wasn't Wagyu. It wasn't served on fine china. But it was the best damn meal I had ever had. It tasted like purpose. It tasted like coming home. That note didn't just change everything. It gave me everything back. It gave me back Artie. It reminded me that a person's true net worth isn't calculated on a balance sheet. It's measured in the lives you touch, the kindness you share, and the love you leave behind. My penthouse is still quiet, but I don't feel lonely anymore, because a part of Me is always in a warm, loud kitchen, peeling potatoes, my heart finally, truly full.